I want to begin not with my own poem. I always like to begin with work by another poet. I'm just going to read a small poem. This is by Calvin Harrington, and he was a Black scholar, critic, poet, and pioneer of Black studies. And this is his poem, The Distant Drum. And these are his words. I'm not a metaphor or symbol. This you hear is not the wind in the trees, not a cat being maimed on the street. I'm being maimed on the street. It is I who weep, laugh, feel pain or joy. Speak this because I exist. This is my voice. These words are my words. My mouth speaks them. My hand writes. I am a poet. It is my fist you hear beating against your ear. And again, that was Calvin Harrington. The poems that I will read for you this evening come from my newest book, which is Yard Show. Very proud of Yard Show. And I will read straight through. The first poem I'm going to begin with is the title poem, Yard Show 1. And it's a poem that's in sections, but I'm just going to pause between those sections, and I think you'll be able to understand what I'm doing. And it's a poem that begins with an epigraph. Yard Show. African American yards, yard shows, are powerfully rhetorical spaces where dross is turned into gold, where ordinary materials are sanctified, and where space is consecrated. John Beardsley. I should have paid attention to flowered urns lined in solemn symmetry along the drive, to Peter Pan in painted knickerbockers, to his cement fingers cupped to painted lips, calling, what query, what answer, whose distant ear? I should not have dismissed as déclassé or disavowed plaster ducks and plastic hens, a pug, a lion cub, 2 ponds, 3 fountains, all the wrought iron filigree and sconces, but should have weighed instead her argument, denial of restraint or boundary beyond her own. Black Versailles, black Baroque, ado, outdo, and overdone, no minimal or less. I don't like a whole lot of space. It looks bare till you put something in it. Beauty, see also, 1, intersectionality of property rights and identity formation in Black women. 2, the Great Migration and the influence of Southern folkways on African American gardening. 3, the impact of the Black feminine on the American landscape. 4, urban renewal and the erasure of local Black hegemony. 5, Black gardening as ideological resistance to neo-colonization and white supremacy. 6, see also yard art, vernacular landscape design, dressed yards, yard shows, spirit garden, material song. See beauty, or what I know I got a right to. Didn't her yard trouble? Didn't her hanging baskets and red bricks say, look, say, I'm here? Didn't the hoe she drove into black dirt, drove that time into a snake's spine, prove that this space, this right here, belonged to her? When it gets bad, I just get out there in my garden, get to digging, and the world just goes away. World, she said, meaning all that mess outside her gate that she tried to sway with concrete swans, bird baths, and a red-capped gnome. yard work, spirit work, woman's work. Come with me, she says. Help me feed the fish. We go to her backyard pond, the one she dug before he could come home and tell her what to do. The one she saw in her mind. I knew what I wanted, didn't need a blueprint. We sit and gaze into gone by, watch another Aphrodite rise from the long ago in bobby socks and penny loafers, belly swollen with her first child. Who can tell me what beauty is? Fanon asked. She asked, aren't they pretty? The fish come for pellets spilled from a plastic scoop. They come for her laughter, though the water distorts the notes. Pleasure, a language the light speaks, a language this Black woman knows and has tried for so long to teach. This next poem is Burn. The wind then, through seams of blue stem or switchgrass, swayed by a coyote's passing. Where the fabric gapes, Roland Barthes said, lies the sensual. A prairie cut by winding seeps or winds or shearing wings, mare's tails, mackerels, cirrus. Distance dispersed as light. Under a buzzard's bank and sparrow, the prairie folds and unfolds. Here, between the stands of blue stem, I am interruption. I rake my fingers over culms and panicles. Here, seeds burr into my sleeves, spur each hem. In a prairie, I am chance, I am rupture. The wind, thief, ruffian, quick-fingered sky, snatches a kink of my hair. The broken nap falls, wound round like a prairie snake, a coil of barbed wire, a snare for the unwary. In the fall, volunteer naturalists will wrench invading roots and scour grassy densities with fire. Wick, knot, gnarl, my kindled hair will flare, burn, soften into ash, ash that will settle, sieve through soil, compost for roots to suck and worms to cast out into the loess that raises redtop, turkeyfoot, side oaks grama, and all the darkened progenies of grass that reach and strive and shape descent from light. A wasp settles on my eyelid, but when is attention ever without risk? Memoir of a heritage tourist. On I-72, heading west, could take exit 133A to forgotten Coal Wars, the Pana Massacre, the Battle of Verdun, Black and immigrant laborers, ruthless capital, and troops summoned to stay the bleeding. Or in any direction, old black codes, sundown towns, and closed covenants. Exits 138 or 144 to the nearest correctional facilities. 5 more in driving distance. But I'm heading to Springfield, through flatscapes, past variegated greens, the Second Amendment Burma-shaved on fence post. Shooting sports are safe and fun. There's no need to fear a gun. While a voice on the radio predicts farm futures. In a filling station remade as a museum for roots tourism, I study the Negro Motorist Green Book. Black folks leaving, that audacity to leave, faith enough to snatch their bodies elsewhere. First wave, second wave migrations following the road and its minstrel shows, knowing where darker bodies could or could not. Get your kicks on Route 66. Nat King Cole, his hair conked and tar shiny, smiles the lyrics. Every black ear listens to the unspoken irony and the warning. Blackened windows, a blackened door. At the edge of Springfield's old black district, the Lincoln-colored old folks and orphans home. A red brick Italianate where 60 to 70 children, elders, and disabled squeezed into 6 bedrooms and a basement. Where Miss Eva Monroe held on from Teddy's Rough Riders to Ethel Waters on the radio lamenting stormy weather. Say a Tuskegee airman tried to save it, make it into a tourist attraction. He died. Good work, good trouble, to save and to keep, at least to try. Frederick Douglass in 1888. Colored people are bound to keep the past in lively memory till justice shall be done them. Bound, he said. Bound and boxed in an upstairs closet, what we carried north, letters, a rag doll, a quilt, a pocket watch, fading photographs, and in this Depression-era school book, a black girl's stories and notes. Lamar County Training School. Henry Walker, Lillian Hollis, Annie Allman, Elsie Bowman, Jane Hoffer, Addie Johnson, Ruby Walker, Charlie Bowman. Hand-colored maps of the western states. Her words, silver moonlight made a path across the lake. In a cardboard box lie keepsakes, keepsafes, the pages time-scorched, even tenderness abrades. Tomorrow, I'll buy acid-free tissues and museum-quality boxes. I'll secure the words of a black girl passed down. That justice owed her, that bond. To the white girl who scolded me that not everything is about race. The moon is in its highest seat. We try to position the telescope. You insist it's the sea of tranquility, dust on the lens, I say. Over the tree marigold, a hummingbird hovers, then winks away. I think the large blue-white trumpets are morning glories. Such silly cabbage moths, sulphie dancing, they whirl and whirling, they listen and listen and listen. Sumaya has a collection of mussel shells on her front porch, heel splitters, fat muckets, and 3-horned wartybacks. My brother left us years ago, refuses now to speak to anyone. Particulate, splendiferous, skillet, and jubilee. I truly believe the tall grasses are beautiful, the way they davin and lift their seedy panicles. A ruined art installation releases its plastic cups, mylar, and cellophane over the reconstructed prairie. I'm not adopted, and yet I am not the same skin color as my mother or my father. How do they know me? How do they call me daughter? Rise and bow down, rise and bow down. Oh, pilgrims, don't you feel the light on your face? Whatever happened to that garter snake, the one that left such a lengthy sentence beside the garden hose? No, I said, not everything. Is it beauty that we owe? I stir a glass bottle filled with glass beads and remember your lesson, to leave a flaw, one bead to break the pattern, to free the maker, not in error, but humility. We are not gods. The last bead molded into a fist, a grit, a clog that stops the machine. No tidy endings. Wrong color, wrong shape, wrong size. The last bead set like a door or a period or the stone before the tomb's mouth. Pattern revealed as fraud and faint. I purposely err, as you taught me, and choose odd and ugly and unlike, and into every making I weave fault, disruption, ember. This is pausing beside her yard. I slow, I still before raptoral legs. A mantis, luminous and green on a concrete rim, such dangers in the feints and meetings of bright shells, such peril in a pause. Dawdle, delay, delight, the musician's rest, the erotic that rises from Bart's interruption, and Yu Futuan's proposition, place is a pause in movement. I move, I shift, my fingers lift, lower, pause on a slope of hip and restless, settle, belong. A pause, a hesitation, our doubt and uncertainty. We don't know. We know we don't, and yet a pause before moving forward anyway. And this will be my last poem. One of the places that I had the pleasure of traveling and working on this book was Pembroke, Illinois. It's one of the oldest Black settlements in the state of Illinois. And this poem is in sections, but I'm just reading the very last section. So Pembroke Township, Illinois, spring 2022. Mulberries, wild plums, blackberries, sweetness carried in a sparrow's gut and shat here. How do you know it wasn't the sparrow's song and not the sparrow's shitting that sowed the berry? How to measure poverty? Can I know by looking at or looking from or looking over? Everywhere, the sand thatched with wild strawberries. Where to step? And the story she told, her son's insistence they didn't need a radio, already had music, cicadas, bees, a towie's drink your tea, drink your tea. In Pembroke, a woman walks beside a gravel road, plucking blackberries from roadside canes, black fingers stained with purple ink, writing what and where they will. Thank you.
What a treat to hear you read again. It's been a little while. I have had the good fortune to see you read live in person on several different occasions. And I'm always reminded immediately that you have a background as a storyteller. I think even before we published your first book, you were working as a librarian and a storyteller, if I'm remembering that correctly. And it's such a treat to hear you read. And it's almost like I have a hard time imagining you not telling a story with whatever you're saying at any given time. And it occurred to me, how much does storytelling intersect with your writing, on the page? Do those rhythms and everything come to you as you're writing as well?
You will definitely find storytelling, and I should say thank you, Peter. You'll definitely find storytelling in my work. It's been a long time since I worked professionally as a storyteller. It was like the mid-90s when I stepped away from it. But even so, you'll still find stories in my poems if you know how to look. So I'm thinking about the poem in here, Night Rising, I think is the name of it. Yeah, night fishing. Sorry, night fishing. And basically, you have a family that's fishing in Hickman Lake in Nebraska. It's a Black family. But what happens, the poem shifts from memory into sort of a magic realism because the children in this memory literally turn into catfish. Um, they are fish now. Three catfish that loves rains, improvisations, and anything by muddy waters. So it goes on imagining them as fish. And I think in all of my books, if you know where to look, you'll see stories, moments where I flip reality and take it elsewhere.
Yeah, and I mean, just as I was preparing for the interview too, it did get me looking just at your whole back catalog. And so the first book that you published and the first book that BOA published of yours, and we've been fortunate to publish all of Janice's books, I should mention too. The first one was Even the Hollow My Body Made Is Gone,
Mhm.
which won the A. Poulin Junior Poetry Prize contest. And so we published that in 2006. And as I'm thinking about storytelling, I mean, in a way, these seem to me, and I'm just going to say to me, these
Uh-huh.
seem to me more your stories.
Mhm.
And then the next book was The Hands of Strangers, Poems from the Nursing Home. That came out in 2011. And as we're talking about stories, I mean, very much, as it says almost in the title, Poems from the Nursing Home, it could say stories from the nursing
Right.
home, in
Mhm.
poetic form,
Yeah.
talking
Yeah.
about people in the nursing home. And
Right.
then again, Primitive was the third book. This came out in, what year did this come out? 2016. And this is the, oh, yeah, I'm so sorry. This is, oh yeah, The Art and Life of Horace Pippin.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Horace. So, I mean, again, you could easily say, like, it sounds like the title of a nonfiction book. It's a book of poems, but very much telling the story of Horace Pippin.
Mhm.
And now we have Yard Show, which is again telling a different story, maybe a
Right.
more global story, but always telling stories.
Um, yeah, I guess that's a part of me. I guess that's one of the pillars of 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 my writing and the way I look at the world and the way I see it. And um folklore and folk arts always interest me, and I think you also see that in my writing, and definitely you see it in Yard Show, um, where I'm looking at a different type of folk art, which is the tradition of these fabulous yards. It's definitely identified with us as a Southern tradition. It's definitely something that you would see elderly people engaged in, these fantastic yards that, yeah, sometimes people will look at them and go, oh, that's a junk pile or that's a mess. But if you talk to the people who've created them, there's stories there, there's meaning, there's private symbolism. And I have to say, before we go even any further, anybody who's actually interested in yard shows and the tradition and what they are, definitely there's three books you'll want to get: American Sanctuary by John Beardsley, or African American Gardens in the Rural South by Richard West Maycott, or Keep Your Head to the Sky by Gray Gundaker. And sort of related books, real quick, just three: Get Soil by Camille Dungy, the poet Camille Dungy, Alice Walker's classic essay In My Mother's Garden, or Get My Garden by Jamaica Kincaid. But I I think I came across yard shows as a result of, I think it was African American Gardens in the rural South is the one I picked up first that made me familiar with this practice. And they are associated with the South. They're actually, so I went looking, right? So there was, like, definitely met the definition by anybody's criteria. There was one in Illinois. I was so excited, only to discover that the guy who made it had moved south. So, and it's not there anymore. That was very irritating. But as I went around and looking at walking in the Black neighborhoods and seeing what was going on with the yards, I began to realize that the tradition was there, maybe not blown large, like you would see by the definition of these scholars and these experts. But you could still see that individuality and that voice coming out of these yards. So a yard that's filled with multicolored pots, filled with artificial flowers, and then Bible verses all over the yard. But I also begin to think about the women in my own family and realize, oh my goodness, this is what my mother has been doing all these years, and my grandmother, and and once you start looking, you start seeing. So I don't know what you asked me. I sort of started rambling there. What was the
No,
question, Peter?
that was perfect. I'm so glad because what you just did also was to explain the concept of yard shows a little bit more for people who might not be as familiar with it. And so I'm curious about you personally, your first experience with yard shows, and specifically, did you immediately recognize them as art as opposed to ornamentation or just sort of like happenstance as really intentional art objects?
No, I think I had to evolve. Uh, I had to I had to come to realize this incredible aesthetic, this pride. Um, since I know my mother best and her psychology, I'll just start there. That she has lived in the same house for over 60 years, and that garden, her yard and her garden is the way she communicates with the world. It's her way of trying to make things better. I mean, she will say, she doesn't like, as the poem says, she doesn't like a whole lot of space. She wants to put something in it. And she often said to me, things don't have to be ugly. You could just throw down some sedum, and sedum is a type of flower. But I began to realize that my mother was also an anchor for her neighborhood. She kept it alive. Um, by her roses and her sedum and her dusty millers and her extravagant lawn ornaments, that what she was doing was building a sense of place, um, sort of denying, resisting the chaos that's out in the world. And I began to realize that I've seen that a lot of Black women doing that. I remember when I would walk to school, there was this Black woman. She would be out first thing in the morning, sweeping her walk, sweeping the sidewalk, sweeping the whole block, making it better in that way. So I think I grew slowly just by thinking about it and looking at what was going on and realizing that there was no difference in what they were doing, or trying to do, than what I was trying to do as a poet.
Mm.
They were artists. They're not recognized. It's hidden. And I think a part of that is because they're women. Um, and if I think of all the arts that we associate with women, whether that's gardening or crocheting or cooking, those are things that they don't seem to compare with Picasso's Guernica, but I think they do. I think they do. I think they express a you've got to be tough to create something beautiful and put it out in the world. You've got to be hopeful to do that. And to
Mm.
have that level of hope takes a lot of strength. Um, yeah. So again, I forgot what you asked me. I think I
Your
got
answers are better than the question, so don't even worry
I
about it.
rambled. I'm sorry. Uh,
As you're talking, I'm thinking of Horace Pippin, and in the same way, even the title of the book, Primitive. I mean, it was sort of like here's this amazing artist who is very easily and quickly dismissed by those who would dismiss him. And the same thing, comes through with yard shows. You could drive by and be like, well, there's a heap of stuff in that
yeah,
yard, or you
yeah,
can look at it as an art object. So it's like this. There's a theme between the two books,
yeah, yeah,
certainly.
right. Yeah, I was thinking about that, and there's that poem in Yard Show. It's not Yard Show, sorry. In Horace Pippin, which is about the color blue, the subtlety of blue. And so this art critic is like poo-pooing Pippin's work, and saying like, you know, sort of belittling it. His work isn't subtle. For instance, Blues for the Sky came right out of the tube, maybe with a little white mixed in. So he's being belittled by this critic. And this poem is basically looking at all the different ways and meanings of blue. But at the end, it says, he paints vapor trails, clouds, vastness. And this is the point. He uses any damn color he chooses. And I think that's the point of these yard shows too. It is they're this abundant, exuberant, extravagant individuality, right? It's my yard. This is I own this. I'll do any
Yeah.
damn thing I please. Yeah. So yeah, there is a connection, and I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah. And I love, when I've heard you talk about yard show too a little bit. You've talked about not just being a meditation on place, but also place making, which
Mhm.
I think is a really interesting and unique way to look at it. Can you say a little bit more about place making?
Yeah. So basically, what happened is I realized that when I would write poems, they were all coming from memory or they were all coming from the South, where I hadn't lived for many, many years. It was like my imagination was still anchored there. And I thought, why don't I write about the Midwest? What's wrong with my
Mhm.
imagination? Why hasn't it put down roots? And so I wanted to know, well, how do you belong to a place? How do you make it? And that's what led me to looking at the yard shows, because that is a way of placemaking. But what I also realized, I was so pleased to get the Guggenheim because I used it for to work on yard show, and it allowed me to leave my what I knew, my daily life, and go out into the world and meet other artists and talk to them about their lives and what they were experiencing in the Midwest. Go to historical towns and settlements like Pembroke or Lyle's Station or New Philadelphia and many others. I'm still going out and doing that. But then what happened? It was sort of like what T.S. Eliot, I think, said, you come back, everything brings you back and you see the place again, you see it anew. And so by going out and asking questions and um talking to artists and thinking, I did shift my imagination. I did start to sink roots. And so I realized that placemaking, that place was a verb. You have to do it.
Mhm.
And and it's not like you do it once and oh, I belong. You it's like a lifetime activity of grounding yourself and grabbing hold to where you are and saying, this is mine, I belong here. And the book gave me a chance to discover just Midwestern history about Black lives that I didn't know, and and I loved talking to people. One of the things that I did was go out and I talked to artists, I talked to normal people. That sounds funny. I don't think I meant that the way it
We know
sounds.
what you mean.
And what was funny was I wish I could remember the exact question. I think it was something like, do you feel welcome here or do you feel
Mhm.
it was like there was other part of the question I couldn't remember. And so I'm talking to people and I begin to realize that I'm hearing the word staring a lot. So
Mhm.
these are Black artists and Black people, and the word I wouldn't provoke it, I wouldn't lead them there, but always somewhere staring. And a Black artist, a photographer in Bloomington, talked about how when he traveled through the central part of the state, he wouldn't stop at the small towns. He took his lunch with him. I mean, this is, you know, 2020 or 2021, whenever it was. He wouldn't stop in those small towns because he didn't feel welcomed. He knew he didn't belong. in quotation marks. And um, I still want to write a poem about staring. Haven't done that yet, but I will. But it was really interesting to see how other people were encountering the Midwest and negotiating um, life outside of the big cities. And I would say too that that's another purpose of Yard Show. I very deliberately wanted to go into small towns, rural areas, because too often Black life is only looked at in terms of the big urban areas,
Mhm.
Chicago, Detroit, New York. I wanted to see what other story is out there. And there are numerous stories out there that again are are overlooked. But yeah, whatever you ask me, once again,
Yeah. Well, what one word as you're talking, I kept thinking of the word oasis. And I realized that, in reading the book, you have these bright, let's call bright spots, these oasis of yard shows, but they're oasis because they're in the middle of some really intense, dangerous, to me as the reader, fearful feeling. And that, you're not a character per se in this book. You really keep yourself pretty far out of it, but at the same time we're aware as readers that you're the poet, who's going to those places. So I also as the reader felt a fear for you, for your
Oh,
safety, for the safety of those who are creating these yard shows, and was really aware of this sort of ominous presence hanging over the beauty of these yard shows. And like you had said so well earlier, you can't make something beautiful without hope. And I think that bears repeating because that you can't have an oasis
right,
without hope,
right, right, right.
and the necessity of that for survival's sake, just maintaining oneself, right?
I think the other thing that I came to realize is that um yard show is a good metaphor for what we are as human beings. Like we're each our own yard show, right? We each display in some way. Um and I like that idea that we're profoundly individual and trying in our some small way to um make a noise, maybe. I think about James Baldwin. Did I say this already? That great quote from James Baldwin where he says that uh you write in order to change the world, knowing perfectly well that you probably can't. And then he says the world changes according to the way people see it. And if you alter even but a millimeter the way people look at reality, then you can change it.
Mm.
And yeah, and that's exactly what the people who are trying to create these yard shows are doing, changing the way people see the world by a millimeter. Um, and I appreciate that, and that's something I want to celebrate. I think folk artists should be celebrated. Their inventiveness, that creativity, that that wait, that's not how they do it in art school. I enjoy all that, and I think it's something that we should. I like seeing it, and I encourage people to go out and look at folk art wherever they find it.
Yeah. And what would you love a reader to experience or consider or appreciate or take away from their time spent with the collection yard show?
And I don't think there's one thing. I think there's like all kinds of things. I hope maybe they think I'm going to go out and look. I'm going to go out and look at what's around me. Or it could be I was talking to a colleague and we started talking about yard shows, and she realized that her uncle had been doing this all these years. The family sort of poo-pooed it and looked like, that's junky. And she realized that that's what he was doing. Um, so I think if my book makes people look at people and see them and make them feel seen, I would be happy with that outcome. If it makes you go out and look at a prairie, I would enjoy that outcome. Um, I I just hope it touches somebody. Um, that's about the best I can hope for. I think there's the first poem in the not the first poem, the second poem in the book where I say that I'm sort of I'm going to take I'm taking a yard show as my own manifesto. I say to shape a yard show, to take her words, only more of nothing, lest you do something with it, as a manifesto, as compass, and please no eye but my own. A cement virgin painted black, a plastic stallion's head hung on the shed wall. Her words used for yardstick, for measure, for any bare, bereaved, or unbearable, add something. So
Mm.
yeah, yeah, I just want people to read the poems. I'd be happy for that.
Yeah. Well, they definitely will get much out of them. I think it's a beautiful book, and I'm so happy that Poe was able to publish it. And I wonder, I don't know if I'm putting you on the spot, but would you be able and willing to read one more poem before we sign off? We have a couple minutes here.
Sure, how many minutes does we have?
Oh, plenty to read one, a few minutes. But Janice,
Okay.
before you do, I'm going to sign off, and I appreciate you chatting with me tonight and being here with all of us. And thank you for sharing your work with us. It was so wonderful to hear.
Oh, thank
And
you.
okay, we'll talk to you later. Bye.
Okay. All right. Oh, one last poem. All right. Let's do when identifying tall grass. I set their stalks in a glass vase. Tall grasses, I do not know. Spikes, panicles, racemes. The key is to look at the structure of their seeds. As always, the smallest part of the pattern shapes the form. That counts for everything. Tetsuya Fujita, in the aftermath of Hiroshima, studied blasted trees, seared bones in a schoolyard, the forecast of future disasters. What figures, what patterns make any life? What shaped my own? Charles and Anna heading north in a yellow station wagon. Many thousand gone, going away from, going towards. Think of the Great Migration as disruption or pattern recognition. Jump down, turn around, and in the photo, her plaid skirt and bobby socks, his hands on the child's shoulder, the long windows of the back end, the way they pose, everything repeating, saying aloud, this is an American family, which is what they wanted and why they left. Given the blast zone, the debris of 63, why stay? A third wave, their own middle passage north. How far they traveled in a day, where they stopped or couldn't stop, tires beating, what might be, might be. The grasses? Prairie switchgrass, Canadian rye, and side oaks grama, but I could be wrong. And that's Yard Show by Janice Harrington. Thank you.
Janice, wow, thank you so much for that reading and Peter for the conversation afterwards. That was just wonderful. It is a beautiful book, and I'm sure you've inspired many listening tonight to pick up a copy and
Thank you.
indulge.
Thank you.
So thank you so much to Janice and Harrington for joining us. Thank you all for coming out tonight. Please look for more BOA Meet the BOA authors coming up in the next coming months. And everyone be well and stay warm out there. Take care. Bye-bye.